Hi everyone, Aaron here for Zollotech, and today Apple released iOS 18.5 Beta 4. iOS 18.5 Beta 4 is available to developers, and iOS 18.5 Public Beta 3 should be available soon. iOS 18.5 supports all iOS 18 supported devices, and this particular update came in at 838.9 megabytes. That's on my iPhone 16 Pro Max. It was in the 800 megabyte or so range on all the devices you see here. Along with this, Apple also released iPadOS 18.5 Beta 4, macOS 15.5 Beta 4, tvOS and HomePodOS 18.5 Beta 4, along with visionOS 2.5 Beta 4 and watchOS 11.5 Beta 4, and a couple older updates as well for macOS. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the build number and talk about what's new. So we'll go into settings, then general, then about. As you can see, the build number is 22F5068A. With an A at the end of the build number, it means we're really close to a final release. We could have a release candidate or iOS 18.5 RC as soon as next week, but we'll talk more about that a little bit later. There is no modem update from Beta 3 to Beta 4, so there was no change there. On the 16 Pro Max, we have version 1.60.02, and there's been no change from that from Beta 3 to Beta 4. You may have a different number if you're on a different device, though. But overall, the connectivity has been good. I haven't noticed any issues there. As far as new features and changes, well, this is mostly a bug fix update so far and stability update, but there are a few things worth mentioning. Previous betas mentioned new Pride wallpaper. However, we're seeing more than just that in this update. If we go to add a new wallpaper, every year around this time, we have a new Pride wallpaper. However, we now have mention of a couple other new wallpaper that should be added in this update if Apple does decide to add them. Aaron P613 on X or Twitter posted what they could be. And you'll see he said iOS 18.5 Beta 4 hints at two new wallpaper that are coming soon. Innumerable dark and light dots create overlapping graphite contoured pockets shielding emanations of light. So that's the first one, a trio of crystalline bubbles enfold refractions of light, divulging a simulacra of aberrations through spherical contours. So those are some that we may see very soon. We don't know if this is for Pride or something else, but it looks like it could be all new wallpaper. So hopefully we'll see that very soon, as Apple has really been lacking with wallpaper in general. We haven't seen anything else change really, so if we go into our accessibility, for example, go to touch, go down to back tap, we still have the option to show the banner. So if I tap the back here, double tap, we should see that. You'll see a little banner there. And if I switch to light mode, you can see it a little bit better. You'll see it there. So we have that banner option. They removed that with iOS 18.4 where they had it in previous betas. The other thing I wanted to mention is within Photos. Under recently deleted photos, they previously had some options at the bottom. While those options are not here at the bottom, they are at the top. If you go to select and then go to the three-dot menu in the bottom right, we can recover all or delete all. So they're still there. They're just not those nice new options that we had at the bottom before. Another thing that's new on all iPhones is the Vision Pro app. As soon as I installed this and around the same time it released to the developers, you'll see we had a new option where it said New in Spatial Gallery. Experience incredible new spatial photos from around the world. It also looks like we have a new Apple Immersive Adventure, and overall they update this regularly. So these were updated at the same time, so even if you don't have the beta, you should see this as well. Other updates coming to iOS 18.5 have to do with the Mail. For example, in Mail, there's a hint that we have something else to the far right, so we can swipe over, go to All Mail, and then in the upper right, the three-dot menu, we have About categories and Show Contact Photos. Depending on which view you're in, depends on what shows up here with Show Priority or Show Contact Photos. So a slight change there. We also have Apple Care Plus UI interface updates. So under System, if we go back and then we go to General and then About, and under Apple Care, once it loads, you can see the new interface. So that's a small change as well. Other Apple releases today have to do with new Beats Pill colors. They're now available in pink at Target and a navy blue at Walmart. So thanks to my friend Brom the other day, he spotted this and I posted it on X. It looks like Target accidentally stocked it beforehand, but it's a new exclusive color to Target and then to Walmart. So it's available now if you wanted to pick one up. Now, as far as other features, well, of course, Apple's saving a lot for iOS 19, but the first features we should see should be within a couple weeks. Last year on May 15th, Apple announced a bunch of features we saw in iOS 18. And you can see that here in their press release last year on May 15th, Apple announces new accessibility features, including eye tracking, music haptics, and vocal shortcuts. So these are things that we'll see ahead of time. It will give us a hint at what to expect with iOS 19, maybe some small interface changes we haven't seen before, but they typically update this. Maybe they'll just have it looking like iOS 18, but things such as motion or vehicle motion cues, which I use all the time, things like that they added and more. So they typically go into that in a couple weeks from now. So hopefully we'll see that. Of course, iOS 19 will bring all of the big changes with an interface update, changes to Control Center, changes to the interface, how we interact with things, and supposedly it's going to look more like the Sports app. So if you have the Sports app, you can go into that, and in the upper right, there's a menu here, and you'll see a menu pops out. We have everything from our settings right here, options there, as well as edit, and I really like this interface as the settings are directly in the app. I would love to see this throughout iOS, so maybe we'll see that, but there are some other things to talk about with iOS 18.5 Beta 4 as far as bug fixes. Good news as far as CarPlay is concerned, it's now working for those who said it wasn't working in Beta 3. So those that plugged it in or had wireless CarPlay, sometimes it wouldn't work. Now it seems to work. So far, there's no stutters, whether that's on an older device or newer device. So if we swipe over here, maybe go into an app like music, the overall stuttering, micro stutters have disappeared, and they didn't return for most in Beta 3, so that's great. Beta 4, I would expect it to be even better. Notifications seem to be fixed, they scroll properly, and Bluetooth long press is fixed. I've seen that mentioned by others where they'd go in here, press on Bluetooth, and sometimes it wouldn't work. It's now working as you would expect. So it looks like there's a ton of little bugs and fixes here. The only one that still remains for me, sort of, is the wallpaper bug. It's almost as if they've finally fixed it. If we pull down here, you'll see the overall wallpaper. If I scroll back home, now it desaturates. However, previous times I've seen it resaturate. So it desaturates, resaturates, that time it desaturated. So it just depends when I'm using it. So maybe they're finally working on it, or maybe it'll never be fixed until iOS 19. Now, so far at the time of filming this video, Apple has not updated their release notes. However, last week with Beta 3, they only updated a couple things where they resolved issues with security and there was a known issue for Siri. So hopefully they update this soon, but if they don't, I'll talk about it in the weekend follow-up video. As far as releases coming soon, well, iOS 18.5 RC could be as soon as next week. Based on what we're seeing, I would expect it on the 5th, with a public release probably on the 12th. That's typically what Apple does. And then, of course, they'll move on to iOS 18.6. And then iOS 18.4.2 could be coming soon, and the reason I say that is Apple stopped signing iOS 18.4. Now, it could be just a couple weeks away, and instead they'll just wait until iOS 18.5, but in the meantime, we could see an iOS 18.4.2, but it's hard to say depending on how many releases are left. iOS 19, though, of course, is the focus, and that's about a month or so away. So on June 9th, we'll see that at WWDC 2025 for the first time. I would expect iOS 18.5 Beta 1 then, betas throughout the summer. The public beta is usually a couple weeks later, and then a public release sometime in mid-September, usually a week before the iPhone launch. So that's usually what we see. There's no reason to believe any changes to that. As far as performance, many people have said this update is very smooth so far, whether it's on the older version, iOS 11, or the newer one, iPhone 16 Pro Max here. So going into the app library, ProMotion seems nice and smooth, and this can ramp up and down to different levels depending on how fast you're scrolling, how far you're scrolling, and more, but it is variable and it's meant to do that. But overall, it seems very smooth. If we go into music like I did before and scroll, it's going to be a little bit slower on this one here, the iPhone 11, since it only has a 60 Hertz display, not as smooth, but in general, opening things such as the camera, which is important, seems to be nice and fast, and in general, pretty good. So I really haven't seen any issues with it so far. Of course, a few days later could change, and we'll talk about that in the weekend follow-up video. As far as overall heat, well, I did notice the phone was quite warm after installing the update. It took a while to cool down and is definitely still processing something in the background. As far as the battery, well, this takes a few days to measure as well, but if we go into battery health, you'll see I'm at 100% with 185 cycles. So we're seeing the battery health drop to about 99% after around 250 cycles so far. So overall, it's doing just fine. And as I mentioned, it takes a few days to measure this, but yesterday I had pretty terrible battery life with Beta 3, 1 hour and 27 minutes of screen active time, 1 hour and 37 minutes of screen idle time, using over 50% of the battery. The day before, I used less battery, but depending on the day, it varied greatly depending where I was, what my signal was like, and you'll see a few days ago, 4 hours and 47 minutes, and I used about 70% of the battery. So depending what I'm doing, of course, it's going to vary greatly. Today is 2 hours and 43 minutes of screen active time, 1 hour and 49 minutes of screen idle time, and we're at 68%. So it's looking better already, but we'll have to take a few days to check this out, see what it's like, and we'll talk about it in the weekend follow-up video. Now, if you're wondering if you should install iOS 18.5 Beta 4 or iOS 18.5 Public Beta 3, which is the same thing, I definitely would do that if you're on an iOS 18.5 beta. However, if you're on iOS 18.4.1, at this point, I would hold off. Unless you need to test this as a developer or test some new apps out, I would hold off as it doesn't typically seem to fix all the little issues, and it's still a beta, so you could have some issues from here on out. So I would wait for the public release as far as that goes. When it comes to benchmarks, I'm seeing some odd results here. I had to run it 3 times to actually get good results. So that tells me probably quite a bit is going on in the background, but the best result I got was 3,496 for single core, 8,450 for multi-core. This generally improves over time, but you'll see compared to Beta 3 that we had here, it is a little bit higher in both single and multi-core. So overall, it's doing well within the margin of error. And so that's everything so far with iOS 18.5 Beta 4. Of course, if I find more features and different updates and bug fixes, we'll talk more about that in the weekend follow-up video. If you'd like to get your hands on this wallpaper, I'll link it in the description like I normally do. And if you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe. And if you enjoyed the video, please give it a like. As always, thanks for watching. This is Aaron. I'll see you next time.